In this video, we're gonna tell you the full story behind one of Marvel's most powerful magic users, Wanda Maximoff, aka the Scarlet Witch. Wanda's beginnings. Wanda's story starts when a witch named Natalia Maximoff gave birth to her and her twin brother Pietro somewhere in Eastern Europe. Now, Natalia wasn't exactly built for motherhood, as one could say, considering she was sort of a nomad. So instead of bringing along her newborn kids wherever she went, Natalia opted to put them in the care of her brother Django and his wife Maria. Everything was relatively normal after that. Well, until something truly disturbing happened that would set Wanda and her twin on a path that regular people just couldn't even dream of. You see, the cosmic being known as the High Evolutionary was doing experiments with infants during this time. Eventually, he set his sights on the twins, so he and his cronies tore through Wanda's homeland to get his hands on them. Ultimately, the High Evolutionary would get his wish when some Catholic priest decided to kidnap both Wanda and Pietro and then basically serve them up to the cosmic mad scientist at his stronghold in the mountains of Wondergore. With his prized test subject, and the High Evolutionary then tweaked both Wanda and Pietro's genomes and even masked their DNA to make it look like they're your typical Marvel mutant. And at this point in Wanda's life, she gained her superhuman abilities. After the High Evolutionary's experiments, Wanda acquired mystic powers that originally came from Mount Wondergore itself. Now, for some context, Mount Wondergore isn't an ordinary landmass. It's actually a prison that cages a powerful demon named Chthon, the Lord of Chaos. Afterwards, the High Evolutionary put the two kids under the care of his part human, part bovine servant, Bova. The mad cosmic scientist then planned on sending off Wanda and Pietro to be fostered by Miss America and Wizard, but that ultimately didn't pan out. In the end, the High Evolutionary sent them back to their original surrogate parents, Django and Maria. A few years would pass and Wanda would find herself living a normal life once more. In fact, one could even say that she had a happy childhood growing up with Pietro, Django, and Maria. But as superhero stories go, of course, trouble is just around the corner. Wanda would eventually catch the eyes of a coven of powerful witches when they noticed that the girl had untapped magical potential. Plus, these witches also had visions about Wanda where they saw her grow up into a powerful mystic. So the coven invited her to their home at Castle Russoff, where they tried introducing her into the sisterhood. But the demon lord Chthon caught wind of this, so he sent out a couple of his goons to make sure that Wanda wasn't able to join the coven. A huge fight between Chthon's lackeys and the coven ensued, and it only stopped when Wanda, for the first time in her life, managed to manifest her hex magic. In doing so, however, Wanda left herself open to let Chthon reach into her soul. The demon lord then told Wanda that she's prohibited from becoming part of this coven or any other magical collective for that matter. In the end, Wanda was sent back to her parents. Now, remember when we told you that living with their aunt and uncle was more or less a happy experience for Wanda? Well, good things come to an end, as they say, because the Maximoffs would eventually find themselves living in poverty. Things got so bad that their uncle Django had to steal just to keep their family alive. Their fellow villagers would find out about this, and things just got worse from there as they attacked the Maximoffs' home. Panic and fear ensued during this whole debacle, and Pietro ultimately made the call to whisk his twin sister away from the chaos with the powers he got from the High Evolutionary's experiments, super speed. After that, Wanda and Pietro would find themselves homeless, barely scraping by as they tried to survive with whatever means they could. Wanda's villainous roots. During their teen years, Wanda would accidentally burn an entire village they were living in at the time because of her powers. The residents of this little village then turned on her and even branded her the name Scarlet Witch, the same name that she'd use when she eventually puts on the cape and tights. Ultimately, a powerful mutant going by the name Magneto would intervene in this debacle and save both Wanda and Pietro from the clutches of the enraged villagers. She would then dedicate her life to repaying this debt of gratitude to the master of magnetism. Little did Wanda know that this would be the beginning of her life as the fabled Scarlet Witch, because after basically swearing fealty to Magneto, both Wanda and Pietro would be part of his brotherhood of mutants. She and her brother would find themselves regularly fighting with Charles Xavier's X-Men. During their first ever encounter with gifted youngsters, the Scarlet Witch would prove her prowess when she single-handedly defeated Angel before handing him over to Magneto. Of course, no bad deed would go unpunished, and the X-Men would prevail when they cornered the Brotherhood and rescued Angel in the end. Now, Wanda's career as a costume superhuman might not have started heroically, but that gradually changed. The first signs that she was not meant to be a villain showed when Magneto came up with a scheme to straight up eliminate the X-Men for good. Wanda disagreed with this plan, so she ended up turning on Magneto. She even managed to wound Magneto during this fight, which just goes to show that Wanda is not one to mess with. Still, Wanda had a debt of gratitude to pay to Magneto, so she didn't leave the Brotherhood just yet. But as the old adage goes, fool me once, shame on you. The proverbial straw that broke the camel's back came shortly after Wanda's first big disagreement with Magneto. Not long after that whole eliminate the X-Men plan of his failed, the Brotherhood would then throw down with Charles Xavier's students again. This time, however, the tables turned and Jean Grey would be able to capture Pietro, now going by the codename Quicksilver, and hold him hostage. Wanda would ask for Magneto's help in saving her twin brother, but she'd find out that Magneto was already so far off the deep end that he was willing to have Quicksilver taken out if it meant eliminating his rivals. In the end, Wanda would enlist the help of the so-called First Mutant and King of Atlantis, Namor, to foil Magneto's plan and help her get her brother back. Ultimately, she and Charles would come to an agreement for her brother's release. Namor even admitted to having a crush on Wanda by the end of this adventure. Both Wanda and Pietro would kiss the criminal life goodbye when they decided to leave the Brotherhood shortly after all of this. Wanda joins the Avengers. You should know that the Marvel Universe was experiencing a shakeup at this point in time. Most notable of this is the fact that almost all of the original lineup of the Avengers, Earth's mightiest heroes, had taken a sabbatical from the team. The only OG Avenger left at this point was Captain America, who then decided to draft a second generation of Avengers. And that's where Wanda comes in, as she and Pietro found themselves on the side of justice during this era. However, the Scarlet Witch's first foray into the crime fighting would be short-lived, as Wanda would lose her superpowers shortly after joining the team. Meanwhile, Quicksilver would find himself under Magneto's thrall again. All of this amounted to the twins parting ways with the Avengers. Wanda would then strive to regain her abilities shortly after leaving Cap's team. To do this, she poured through thousands of pages of books about magic and mysticism. In doing so, however, Wanda unintentionally grabbed the attention of an interdimensional being named Archon. Now, Archon's a piece of work. This guy kidnapped a bunch of human scientists so that he could force them to save his planet. And as for the Scarlet Witch, well, Archon kidnapped her in hopes of making Wanda his bride. So yeah, he might be a bad guy, but he's a bad guy with nice taste in women at least. Ultimately, Quicksilver would ask for Cap and the Avengers' help in saving Wanda, and they'd end up convincing Archon to stop being a jerk. After that, Wanda and her twin would then rejoin the Avengers. It's also around this time that both Wanda and Pietro would learn the truth about who sired them, and it's none other than the guy who originally turned them into supervillains, Magneto. And the hits just keep on coming too, as Wanda had gained a degree of expertise and control of her powers at this point in time. But little did she know that Thawne has been using her as a pawn for his own ends. On the bright side, it was also around this time when Wanda met and fell in love with a fellow Avenger, Vision. It's a bright spot in an otherwise tumultuous life, but as things usually go for the Scarlet Witch, there's always a caveat that comes with her happiness. The thing is, neither Wanda nor Vision knew that their whole relationship was pretty much a sham. It was all orchestrated by the supervillain Immortus, because he believed that Wanda is what's called a nexus being, a kind of anchor that keeps a universe together. If you saw Deadpool 3 recently, you probably heard them refer to the anchor being. This is that in the comics. Believing that the universe would be in peril if Wanda had kids of her own, Immortus made moves to make her marry Vision, who's a synthetic humanoid, basically a robot. Still, Immortus's plan didn't exactly work out because Wanda was still able to give birth to a couple of twins through magic. These kids, Billy and Tommy, were literally created from mystical energies that Wanda absorbed in her body. But here's the thing, these mystical energies actually came from Mephisto, who's pretty much the literal devil of the Marvel Universe. Ultimately, Mephisto reabsorbed these energies, which then caused Billy and Tommy to pop out of existence. This left a huge mental and emotional scar in Wanda, so much that her mentor in the mystic arts, the witch named Agatha Harkness, had no choice but to use her powers to wipe Wanda's mind of any memory of her children. At this point in time, Wanda was serving with an alternate Avengers unit called the West Coast Avengers. That team would be dissolved, which then precipitated the formation of the team called Force Work. Wanda then became the leader of Force Works in a short period that it was active. However, this team would also end up disbanding not too long after its first disastrous mission, which saw the death of her teammate Wonder Man. And just for some much needed context, Wonder Man is actually the same superhero from which Vision's mainframe was based on. Also, you guys should know that Wanda and Vision had separated at this point. As such, Wanda and Wonder Man developed feelings for each other before his untimely death. But this is superhero comics. Death is more of a holiday than a permanent state, because not long after leaving Force Works and becoming Agatha Harkness's student, Wanda further developed her powers. At this point, Wanda had become a master of chaos magic, and it was this same power that allowed her to literally bring Wonder Man back from the dead. They become an official couple after that. She'd continue serving with the Avengers, and her relationship with Wonder Man would eventually fizzle. You might call this era Wanda's dating years too, because she'd end up trying to rekindle her relationship with Vision after a breakup with Wonder Man, but that wouldn't work out either. Then she'd almost date Steve Rogers himself, Captain America, but that relationship ultimately went nowhere too. Wanda loses it. Wanda has become one of the Marvel Universe's premier magic users, but it came at a cost. These same powers put severe mental stress on her. In fact, it only took a snide comment about Wanda's disappeared kids from fellow Avenger Wasp for Wanda to go absolutely nuts and lose control of her powers. Wasp shouldn't have really made that remark, because Wanda ended up on a rampage after that, which saw the death of Agatha Harkness and a few other Avengers like Ant-Man and Hawkeye, who had the misfortune of being in the same room as her at the time. To make matters worse, She-Hulk was even forced to take out Vision after Wanda used her powers to control the humanoid's mind. This tragic turn of events only stopped when the master of the mystic arts, Doctor Strange, intervened and knocked out Wanda. At this point, the remaining Avengers absolutely had no idea what to do with their teammate, so they ended up giving her dad, Magneto, custody of the mentally unstable superhero. Magneto then took Wanda to the mutant nation of Genosha in order to let Professor X help her recuperate. All in all, Wanda's rampage not only caused the death of a few Avengers, but it also mentally broke down some of her teammates. Add the fact that this whole tragedy dealt a huge blow to the team's main financier, Iron Man, and the Avengers had no choice but to disband. So yeah, you really shouldn't have brought the kids into it, Wasp. Thanks a lot. Professor X would do his best to try and fix Wanda's mental state, but he'd ultimately fail in this regard. The situation got so bad that Charles, one of Marvel's biggest pacifists, even discussed taking out Wanda for good. According to him, her powers have become so strong and her mental state so unstable that leaving her alive might literally destroy the fabric of the Marvel universe. Of course, Wanda's twin brother Quicksilver wasn't on board with this plan. He eventually had a talk with his sister about preventing the other heroes of their world from doing an old yeller on her. To do this, Wanda used her chaos magic to warp reality and reshape it. Tables turned in this new world as humanity found themselves to be the minority within the population. Mutants became abundant, and each and every one of them were under the rule of Magneto. As for Wanda, she made the world so that she could live a normal life with her recently revived kids. This world order wouldn't be around for too long, however. Eventually, a girl named Layla Miller and a bunch of other superheroes like Wolverine and Hawkeye managed to find out the truth about what Wanda did to reality. They banded together and tried to bring everything back to the way it was. Layla and the other superheroes eventually reached Magneto and restored his memories of the world prior to Wanda's tampering. This then led him to confronting his son Quicksilver about it. Magneto ended up terminating Quicksilver, and well, things just got worse. So much worse. Wanda would discover what Magneto did to her twin brother, and she'd use her powers to revive him. But this also made Wanda fall further into madness, as she blamed their dad for being so obsessed with leading mutant kind that he was willing to sacrifice his children for it. So in her own twisted way, Wanda decided to punish Magneto and use her chaos magic to utter arguably her most famous line in comics: "No more mutants." Those 3 words kickstarted a cataclysm that would then be known as M-Day, an event that saw the near extinction of all mutantdom. You see, by using her powers, Wanda ended up bringing back the world to its original state, one where humanity still outnumbered mutants. But she cranked the dial all the way up to 1,000, because instead of just bringing everything back to the way it was, Wanda basically ordered the extinction of mutantdom in all of Marvel. In fact, it was only through the efforts of Emma Frost and Doctor Strange that a few children of Adam survived the disaster. In the end, mutant kind was reduced to a fraction of what it once was. The curious disappearance of Wanda. After this, Wanda would retreat to a remote village somewhere around Mount Wundagore. The mental breakdown that she had left her with amnesia, as Hawkeye would discover after saving her life. Curiously enough, Hawkeye and Wanda would even have an intimate relationship after this whole turn of events. Not long after that, X-Men Beast would then track down Wanda to her remote hamlet, where like Hawkeye, he'd find out that she had no memory of her past. While all this was happening, a couple of teenage superheroes from the Young Avengers named Speed and Wiccan decided to go and look for Wanda too. That's because these two boys believed that she's their mother. Their quest to look for Wanda ended in failure though, and that's not to mention the fact that they were ultimately dissuaded by the Mystic Master Pandemonium to stop looking for Wanda for fear that it might cause another cataclysm like M-Day. Meanwhile, Loki decided to take advantage of the turmoil going around the world by using his abilities to impersonate Wanda and form his own version of the Avengers. Granted, the Asgardian god of mischief had noble reasons to defeat Thawne and prevent the Demon Lord from taking over the 9 realms. During this time, the Marvel Universe at large would make efforts to try and find Wanda. Given that only a couple of people on Earth knew where she truly was, namely Hawkeye and Beast, other superheroes decided to look for her in their own ways. For one, her twin brother Quicksilver joined Loki's superhero team to try and look for Wanda. It was only through the powers of the Eye of Agamotto that the rest of the Marvel Universe managed to find out about Wanda's whereabouts at the time. It was during the Eye's search for a new Sorcerer Supreme that the Scarlet Witch's continued existence came to light. You see, Wanda was a bona fide candidate for the job. However, the magical artifact ultimately went another direction and chose the mystic superhero Brother Voodoo instead. That's because the Eye didn't want the new Sorcerer Supreme to be someone with, well, a rather concerning history of mental and emotional instability. Sometime later, Wiccan and Speed would resume their search for their mom. Wiccan would eventually locate her in Doctor Doom's homeland of Latveria, where they also discovered that she was betrothed to the masked supervillain. He'd approach Wanda and tell her about everything from the fact that he might be her son to how she was the cause of M-Day. Now, you guys should know at this point that Wanda Maximoff has unsurprisingly become Earth's most wanted fugitive, and it all came to a head when Wiccan's conversation with Wanda was interrupted by a fight between Doctor Doom, Magneto, the Young Avengers, and the Avengers. This fight stems from the fact that several heroes of the Marvel Universe wanted Wanda to face justice for what she did, while others were actually on her side, like Doctor Doom. During the chaos that ensued, Wolverine almost managed to take out Wanda, but she eventually escaped harm when Wiccan's friend and fellow Young Avenger Iron Lad transported them back in time. Wanda would then regain her memories and magical abilities soon after this. She'd then use her powers to bring her and the Young Avengers back to the present. And in an unusual good stroke of luck for the Scarlet Witch, she'd be able to confirm that both Wiccan and Speed were indeed her actual sons who had been reincarnated. She would then make amends for her past wrongdoings by joining up with mutant team X-Factor and using her abilities to restore the powers of mutants who desired it. We then find out that the reason the Scarlet Witch got her powers back and the reason why she was with Doctor Doom when Wiccan found her was because the Latverian dictator was helping her bring her kids back through the mystical power of the life force. But this was all a ruse because Doctor Doom had ulterior motives. It turns out that he was just using Wanda to pretty much take her powers and become a god. The combined efforts of the X-Men and the Avengers thwarted Doctor Doom's plans, and by the time this whole saga ended, the X-Men found it in themselves to stop hunting down Wanda. On the other hand, her twin brother Pietro and dad Magneto wanted Wanda to stay with them as a family. And hey, even Captain America offered Wanda her Avenger membership card back. Wanda ultimately refused in rejoining the Avengers and instead chose to walk her own path from that point on. Wanda becomes a hero again. The Marvel Universe would find itself in a rather dark place when the Avengers and the X-Men decided to go to war with each other. Thankfully, Wanda had gone back to the side of angels at this point, and she'd end up playing an important part in resolving this confrontation. It all started when Wanda saw visions of the cosmic entity known as the Phoenix Force destroying the Avengers. This grim vision then led Wanda to believe that the only way to stop her vision from coming to pass is with the help of being known as the Mutant Messiah. Now, this Mutant Messiah is an actual person in the Marvel Universe. Her name is Hope Summers, and Wanda was able to draft her into fighting her fellow mutants to stop the Phoenix Force from not just defeating the Avengers, but from laying waste to the world as they knew it. You see, the Phoenix Force has bonded with 5 mutant superheroes, namely Cyclops, Emma Frost, Colossus, Magic, and Namor. They even got themselves a fabulous name for their group, the Phoenix Force 5. This quintet of cosmically powered mutants wanted to shape the world according to their own will, and with the Phoenix Force's power in their hands, let's just say the Avengers were heavily outmatched. Well, almost. That's because it turns out that even all juiced up, the Phoenix Force 5 were still afraid of one Avenger in particular, Wanda Maximoff. So Earth's mightiest heroes came up with a plan to use the Amulets of Illusion to disguise themselves as Wanda, while they each went on different missions to stop the Phoenix Force 5 from achieving their goals. Eventually, the cosmically powered mutants discovered the ruse. Upon finding this out, Namor went on an offensive to try to beat who he believed was a fake Wanda, but he got his Atlantean butt handed to him when he found out he was fighting the OG. reality. Sometime later, Cyclops would become so mad and power hungry that he ended up betraying his own team in order to take the Phoenix Force's power all for himself. And he had one plan: to literally burn the world to ashes. And if you didn't hate Cyclops by now, you probably will when you find out that he had also killed Professor X. But Wanda would prove that she's the GOAT when, along with Hope Summers, she used her powers to alter reality again, the same way she did when she kickstarted M-Day. However, instead of declaring the end of mutant kind, Wanda uttered 4 different words that day: no more Phoenix Force. This move ultimately caused the Phoenix Force to retreat to the further reaches of space and prevent Earth from becoming a burnt-down wasteland. Sometime later, the Red Skull would dig Professor X's grave and extract his brain in order to steal his telepathic abilities. The supervillain then used these stolen powers to control Wanda's mind and force her into eradicating mutant kind once again, similar to what she did on M-Day. However, Wanda managed to break free from Red Skull's control, and along with Rogue and the Avengers Unity division, they'd hateful villain to retreat. Wanda would end up joining the Avengers Unity after that, and we'd eventually witness her death at the hands of fellow Unity Division teammate Rogue after she suspected Wanda being a traitor. But her death would not be permanent, because the Unity Division would undo this when Kang the Conqueror helped them defeat the villains named the Apocalypse Twins via some time-traveling shenanigans. To do this, the Unity Division transferred their combined powers into Rogue, who then gave the Apocalypse Twins their much-deserved beating. Afterwards, Rogue almost went crazy after absorbing so many abilities, so Wanda came in clutch and used her magic to help Rogue return her absorbed abilities to their original wielders. Wanda's true father. Wanda would cross paths with the Red Skull again after some time. This time, the supervillain kidnapped and sent her to his camp located in Genosha. She'd eventually escaped the camp with her allies Alex and Rogue, and it was in the middle of this prison break that they discovered Magneto was also being held in the camp, so they freed him. Magneto then went on a rampage and eliminated each and every one of Red Skull's lackeys before turning his attention to the mastermind of the whole camp himself. He'd end up taking out Red Skull with his bare hands, which then caused the creation of an even more sinister supervillain called the Red Onslaught. Scores of superheroes tried fighting the Red Onslaught, but he was only stopped when Wanda and Dr. Doom used their magical abilities to hotwire the Red Skull's moral compass and basically make him forget he was an ugly, evil villain. However, this same power had a nasty side effect. It ended up affecting each and every hero and villain who were present in Genosha during this whole debacle. As a result, the moral alignments of Marvel's superheroes and villains got reversed. Simply put, the superheroes broke bad and the villains became defenders of justice. The magical spell was so potent that even Wanda wasn't exempt from its effects. Manipulated by magical forces, Wanda wanted to kill Dr. Doom. Pietro and Magneto tried to stop her, but even their combined might was not enough to prevent the Scarlet Witch's rampage. During their fight, Wanda came up with a magical spell to take out anyone who's related to her by blood. This hex apparently killed Quicksilver, but we get the big reveal that Magneto might not really be their father when the same magical spell didn't affect him. The whole debacle ultimately came to an end when Dr. Doom pursued the aid of Brother Voodoo to help him get things back to its original status quo. But at this point, the damage has already been done. Wanda now has doubts about who her true father really is. It would then be revealed that Pietro survived his sister's magical spell in Genosha, and they'd end up looking for the truth about who their real father was. Their search led them back to the mountains of Wondergore, and from there they went to a place called Counter-Earth, an alternate Earth that pretty much served as the High Evolutionary's testing grounds for his experiments. While here, Wanda and Pietro would end up fighting a villain named Villainous, who happened to be another High Evolutionary experiment that was created with the combined power sets of both Wanda and her twin. After defeating Villainous, the twins would confront the High Evolutionary, who would then tell them that their real parents were actually Django and Maria. Plus, they also revealed to them that they weren't really mutants, they were his experiments. Wanda and Pietro would end up fighting the High Evolutionary with the help of the Avengers Unity division after this, with the cosmic scientist escaping in the end. The Scarlet Witch went on a bit of soul searching after the events on Counter-Earth. She'd eventually find out their true mother, or at least their biological one, is undeniably Wanda Maximoff. But more interestingly, Wanda discovered that Natalia was the Scarlet Witch before she took on the mantle. At this point, the Marvel Universe was having another one of their superhero civil wars. Pietro was part of this, and he tried to convince Wanda to join the fight. Wanda refused, and the twins had a falling out when they couldn't agree which side in the war stood for what was right and good. Sometime later, Scarlet Witch would join the fight against Hydra during the Secret Empire storyline. In this adventure, Thawne was able to take control of her body, which then turned Wanda into a supervillain in the League with Hydra's own version of the Avengers. In the end, however, Doctor Strange used his magic to remove Thawne's influence from Wanda. Scarlet Witch makes amends. At this point in Marvel history, mutantdom had formed their own new nation on the island of Krakoa, and because of Wanda's past transgressions, well, let's just say the mutants of this island nation weren't too fond of her. To make up for all the bad things she did in the past, Wanda decided to use her magical abilities to bring everyone back who died because of her actions. But this whole plan went sideways when she ended up with a rabbit's paw situation where she did revive all the mutants that died, but they weren't exactly alive. They became zombies, is what we're trying to say. This whole mess eventually caused a chain of events that saw Wanda helping fend off an alien invasion. And hey, no one found out that she was the one responsible for causing it, so everything worked out for her, I guess. On the bright side, at least we get to see her kid Wakan tie the knot with his longtime boyfriend Hulking after this, and Wanda even got invited to the wedding. Wanda would then set her sights towards defeating the demon lord Thawne when she caught wind of his imminent return. To do this, Wanda joined forces with Doctor Doom and used the powerful grimoire called the Darkhold to try and find a way to defeat him. She discovered that Thawne could be destroyed with the help of 5 champions called the Darkhold Defenders, so she assembled a team to fill that role. But there was a magical wrench in her plan when her chosen champions got corrupted after a reading from the Darkhold. Still, Wanda managed to work with what she had, so she sent her deviant crew to deal with Thawne's evil horde, while she and Doctor Doom confronted the Demon Lord. Ultimately, Wanda defeated him by merging herself with the Darkhold and absorbing Thawne inside her soul. Then Wanda used her powers to remove the corruption from her team. Wanda would then eventually help the citizens of Krakoa formulate a way to resurrect their dead properly. In order to do this, Wanda used her powers to fold time, which then allowed mutants to come back to life from an extra-dimensional plane known as the Waiting Room. The ritual to achieve this required a sacrifice, so Wanda volunteered to do it, using a spell Wanda made so that her sacrifice would appear like foul play. A whole whodunit ensued on the island nation afterwards. However, unbeknownst to anyone else, Hope Summers and Magneto revived Wanda in a secret using a so-called mental backup. Think of this as restoring the Scarlet Witch to an older version, because that's exactly what happened. Magneto and Hope brought back a much younger iteration of Wanda. When this young Wanda found out about the things that her original version had done, like M-Day, she went insane and started attacking the island nation with giant monsters she created with her magic. Somewhere else, however, the OG Wanda was revealed to be somewhat alive at a place called the Eldritch Orchard. OG Wanda then met an older version of herself here, who told her that the giant monsters that her younger self unleashed are her guilt made manifest. The 3 versions of Wanda then ultimately merged into one and defeated the monsters attacking Krakoa. Afterwards, Wanda framed fellow mutant and old friend Toad for her apparent murder. And by the end of this chapter in her life, mutant kind had started to change their opinion about Scarlet Witch. She used to be one of their most hated enemies because of M-Day, but now she was known as the Redeemer, who helped them develop a way to bring back their dead loved ones to life. Wanda would then find herself shacking up in New York, where she would establish the Emporium, a sort of shop and cafe that caters to people who are into magic and mysticism. But the Emporium had more of a noble purpose, because it was also a place where Wanda created a magical portal called the Last Door, which actively seeked out people in need of help and sent them to her. So basically, the Scarlet Witch didn't stop being a superhero, it's just that she chose to actually help people from all over the world instead of fighting monsters and villains at this point in her life. Her time at the Emporium allowed her to meet the likes of Darcy Lewis, who ended up being a close friend and a clerk at the Emporium. Plus, she was finally able to rejoin the Avengers. At one point, her newly revived mentor Agatha Harkness even paid her a visit as well. But that meeting wasn't entirely friendly, as we find out that Agatha's true purpose at the time was to steal Chthon's heart from her so she can use it to create a new Darkhold. Sometime later, Wanda would meet Joseph, Magneto's clone, who she decided to put up at the Emporium like the other people in need. However, it's revealed that Joseph was a spy that a villain named Hexfinder sent to take out Wanda. But in the end, Joseph went over to the side of angels and saved the Scarlet Witch in exchange for his own life. Wanda, however, would meet another untimely demise at the hands of a being named the Griever at the end of all things. After this, her soul was sent to the great beyond, where she then came face to face with a godlike entity known as the Queen of Nevers. The Queen of Nevers is basically the goddess of possibility as far as Marvel's mystical corner is concerned. The Queen then told her that the Nexus beings such as Wanda exist in the multiverse specifically to fight the Griever. Apart from being a Nexus being, the Queen also also informed Wanda that she had the potential to become what is known as the Ultimate Nexus, which has the ability to permanently defeat the Griever. The Queen then gave Wanda a choice. She could stay here in the afterlife or come back to life and continue the ongoing fight against the Griever at the end of all things. Wanda then shows us that she's a true hero when she chose to get back out there and continue existing to defend against the multiversal evil. In the end, Wanda went through a pathway called the Witch's Road, where she made her way past ancient wizards and evil versions of herself in order to return to the land of the living and continue fighting the good fight.